Well, this is a little bit exciting, Glenn. We have been sponsored by Ubisoft to tell everyone about Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
We have indeed, yeah. This is a game that we've spoken about a few times leading up to its release, obviously, coming soon on the Switch. And it's great to be sponsored. Thank you very much to Ubisoft.
As always with these, it means we get to give away a copy or two, so let us know down in the comments what you think of this one, and we'll try and give you all the information that you need to know. We will also be releasing a full review of this in the coming days, but obviously we can't do it the same day as this because, well, that would be a bit odd, wouldn't it?
It would indeed. So what exactly is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown? Well, let's find out.
The story starts out where their kingdom is being absolutely demolished. They're getting annihilated, they're losing badly, and then the 7 immortals, of which Sargon is one, they head into the battle to try and change its course. Needless to say, something goes awry, and your adventure begins. So gameplay wise then, it's quite different to classic Prince of Persia. Those games used to focus on platforming, didn't they?
Yeah, it does share some similarities in terms of the fluency of the movement and traversing obviously the platforms as you go along, but it does have a much stronger Metroidvania feel to it than those earlier games in the series.
Yeah, so you're given quite a large open world. Just to begin with, there's an initial tutorial phase where it will introduce some of the controls, and those mechanics might be familiar to some players and less so to others. Things like a parry move, so that you can, at the right point, try and counter enemy attacks, and if they flash yellow, then you'll be able to do a special move, which has to be said, they look very cool.
Yeah, each one has its own animation, and you'll see a variety of those as you go through the game, fighting a number of different enemies. And they also have a red flash, if you like, which is an unavoidable move, so just be aware of that.
Yeah, the only way to get past those is to use your dash move, which is the other trigger. Controls, I think it's fair to say, are quite tight, and as with any Metroidvania, you unlock new skills, which allows for different traversal options.
So you'll make your way through the different areas of the map as you go along. As Mark said, you will unlock skills that allow you to then access previously inaccessible areas, but there are other skills as well that you can find which you can then assign to yourself in the form of amulets, aren't there?
Yeah, the amulets, they do take up a specific amount of slots, and that can gradually be expanded as you play, and that's done through the trees, which are called the whack whack trees.
Yeah, so the whack whack trees are your save points, and there is a very handy indicator, isn't there, as to where your next one will be, which I thought was a really good inclusion in a Metroidvania. You know that there's always a point in a Metroidvania where you're on the cusp of dying, you found a new area, you've got past a particularly brutal part, and you know one more hit and you're going to die and you're going to lose a huge amount of progress, and at these points you may well see almost like a wind blowing, isn't it, like a yellowish wind blowing. If you follow that trail, it will lead you to the next save point, which I thought was a bit of a godsend, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a ton of those types of things here, and I think accessibility is a big thing that Ubisoft have really tried to develop into the game. There are many different options. Now, Glenn, you have colour blindness, right?
Yes, I do, yeah. And we mentioned earlier the flash point between a parry and an unavoidable move, and that was something I struggled with, seeing the yellows and reds. So there are options available to you where you can change that to your specific form of colour blindness.
Yeah, it's really good. And as far as accessibility, that also extends to the difficulty of the game. You can change different aspects like being able to see all of the items that are on your screen with a small glowing symbol, the overarching difficulty of enemies, the types of parries and how easy that is. You really can tweak it to your own liking, but it also includes a few things that just make you think, yeah, that should be in most of these types of games, you know, like when you're fighting a boss, if you lose, yes, you can go back to the tree if you want, or you can just restart that fight.
Yeah, and again, it's a nice way of handling it, because if you want to go back to the tree to perhaps change your skills that you have assigned, then obviously you can do so, so you're not stuck within that boss fight. But if you feel that it was just, you know, your own skills letting you down, then you can just get straight back on with it.
That accessibility also applies to the map, so if you'd rather know where to go next, then you can have that as an option, or you can have complete freedom to explore as you would in something like Hollow Knight. Now, there are several different types of enemies. You have your basic ones that will just be sword combat, reasonably straightforward using those parry moves, but they do get more complex, and some of them will rely on you using those abilities. And then there are ranged ones as well, aren't there?
There are, and you also have a ranged weapon. Yeah. You have a bow that you can use with a finite amount of arrows, although you can refill these at certain points. And what I liked about this was that the arrows auto aim onto not just enemies but also certain puzzles. For example, it may be that you need to shoot a flower to allow it to open, to use it as a platform, and you may need to do this in mid-air. Doing this would have been quite cumbersome without the fact that it does auto-aim for you, allowing you to quite fluidly move across these puzzle sections.
Yeah, it's really good. It allows for different opportunities for those puzzles, and like Glenn says, different movements that you otherwise wouldn't be able to carry out. But then for those people that would rather manually aim, you can hold the X button down a bit later because it is an unlocked skill, and that's then used for different puzzles. You basically throw, I don't know how it works, if it's part of the arrow or what, but it will stay on a switch and then you can recall it by pressing X again. It's really good. It's a nice little system and it kind of covers both methods of play.
Talking of unlockable skills, we're not talking about the ones within game that allow you to traverse the environment, but you do unlock things like a fast travel system, you know, a short way into the game. We won't say much more than that in terms of what else is available, but just to let you know that those sort of things, albeit they don't start in the game, they will unlock as you go on.
Now, interestingly, I was thinking that this was more linear because I'd played this previously with Ubisoft themselves. I got to play it early, did about 4 or 5 hours, and when I did my playthrough, I think it was because I was wide awake. I followed the path, you know, I was following the path. When I was playing this last night at 2 a.m, I don't know what I was doing, but I managed to go into 2 completely different areas. So there is the potential for those people that like to go off the beaten path and discover some harder areas. You can do that. I was thinking, man, this is much harder than I remember, but I was heading down into the sewers and I didn't need to do that at all.
Right.
So yeah, there is that real freedom if you want to go that way.
So every so often then you will come across a boss and obviously need to fight those. We did mention those in terms of being able to restart from them, but just to touch on the boss battles themselves for a moment, they are quite grandiose in nature, and you will really need to bring your full skill set to the party in order to get past them. Having said that, they are fair though, aren't they? They have clear patterns of play that you need to learn, and doing so will enable you to get better and obviously eventually beat them. But they're definitely a good addition to the game.
Definitely. There are health bars, so that always helps. So you know how far you've got till you reach, hopefully, victory. Now, just to touch a bit more on some of the other mechanics that you may have heard about. Now, there are definitely some influences here. Metroid Dread has played a part on this game's development, I would say. There's a section where you come across an antagonist who will essentially, if you get close enough, he'll grab you by the neck and he'll throw you down into the dungeons. And you'll respawn waking up in the dungeon area. That's quite cool. I do like that. And it feels quite fair because you've got that very clear area to avoid. You know?
Yeah. So like the Emmy robots in Metroid Dread, as you mentioned, you have those moments, and it does instill that dread in you, doesn't it? Because you know all of a sudden that you can't necessarily fight your way out of a situation. You will need to be a bit smarter, use a bit more stealth, or just have your platforming abilities really be on point to escape.
Overall, I think both of us have been really impressed with this. Now, this isn't a review, so we're not going to give you verdicts and things like that, but it's an easy one to talk about, isn't it?
Very much so. The quality is very high. It's a very good Metroidvania, but for me, it has added a lot of tweaks or accessibility options that other games, even if they're on par in terms of the quality of the game, haven't added, that elevated it further still for me, you know, because they're there if you want them, you don't have to use them, so it doesn't affect the game in a negative way at all. It just makes for a more pleasant experience if you need them.
Now, visually, you might see some similarities to even some aspects of the Rayman Legends games because it's coded in the same engine. Now, the team here have managed to get the thing running at 60 frames per second. And I was saying to Glenn earlier, that's really impressive for the visuals here. You've got like some real-time lighting, some 3D effects, parallax. There's a ton going on screen and it just maintains that clip, doesn't it?
It does. It also reminded me of another Ubisoft game, being Immortals Phoenix Rising, in terms of the overall aesthetic and the character models. But having said that, in terms of some of the cutscenes, especially during boss fights, it had a feel of earlier God of War games too. You could see some influences there. It all meshes together very well.
It does, and each area has a real aesthetic that differentiates it. You know, it makes that exploration feel like it's within a world, and you know, rather than just some same old.
Yeah, it's got a nice blend of puzzles in there that does help to, as you say, differentiate those areas. As you get to a new area, there are also some colour palette swaps to allow you to know that you've entered, you know, a new place. But the gameplay mixes up, you know, to an extent as well to definitely allow you, and obviously the new skills that you find complement those new areas.
Absolutely. It's a polished experience, I think, is a concise way of saying it. The whole thing, 60 FPS, we haven't had any crashes and things like that. So yeah, really a nice polished experience. The game is fully voice acted, but there has been a bit of fanfare around the musical score as well, which is done by Gareth Coker, who worked on the Ori games, some of the Halo series, as well as Minecraft, and Mentrix Music, which you may have heard, who has worked on several different games.
It definitely evokes feelings of some of the previous Prince of Persia games, and it's very appropriate for what's going on screen. And you can definitely feel a shift when you enter a boss battle. Obviously it becomes a bit more high octane. You can feel the stakes have risen, and that reflects in the music, which is always it really helps you to immerse yourself in what's going on.
Yeah, it's my understanding that Mentrix did those boss battle themes, and then the other guy did that overarching melodies.
Oh, nice. There we go then. So there is obviously different artists involved, and you can tell in terms of the difference, but because of what's going on the screen being different, it feels quite fluid at the same time, you know?
Price-wise, well, the base game is going to set you back $44.99 or your regional equivalent. There is also a digital deluxe edition as well, if you'd rather go down that route.
Yeah, that comes in about £5 more expensive, and there are some skins available if you do choose to go down that route, as Mark said.
That digital deluxe edition does also include early access to the game, where you'll be able to play it from the 15th rather than the 18th.
And of course it does have a physical release as well, which will be available from most retailers, and is generally a little bit cheaper than the digital version.
And the whole thing will take you about 20 to 25 hours to finish. There are 13 different biomes, 6 different powers, 9 boss encounters, and over 65 unique enemies. Not to mention side quests and off the beaten path secrets. Yeah, so that's it. That's everything about the game so far. Do keep your eye out for our full review. By that time, we would have maxed the game, 100%ed it hopefully, and can give you the full overview. But I think it's fair to say it's been a really easy one to do together because it's a really enjoyable game.
Yeah, really enjoyed this one. As someone who doesn't play Metroidvanias as much anymore, just to time constraints, I could feel myself getting sucked into this one, you know. Yeah, very good game. Thank you again to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video. It's a huge pleasure to work with them. Thank you to our patrons, of course, for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.